All right, I think we'll get started. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are in the US. If you're in Minnesota, like I said, happy snow day, happy blizzard day. My name is Eric Hansen. I am an independent social media marketing consultant based here in the Twin Cities. I've been doing that for the last 14 years. You can find more about me at erichansen.com. I'm also an adjunct professor at the University of St. Thomas. You can see some of those wonderful students there on the lower right-hand corner. I've been teaching a class in social media marketing there for the last 4 years. We're starting a semester right now, in fact. And we would have class tonight if it wasn't for the darn snow. But been having a lot of fun doing that. I work largely with mid-sized and large companies, mostly based here in Minnesota, but not always. And some smaller companies as well. It's not all larger and mid-sized companies, but these just give you an example. I've worked with 75 different companies over the last 14 years, mostly in social media marketing, but a little bit in PR as well. And the work usually revolves around 3 different areas. I do a lot of audits, social media audits and strategy work. I just completed 2 actually. The first couple months of the year here, I'm working on 2 more. Those are usually a lot of fun and a lot of pretty useful for the clients from what I've heard. Second bucket would be content strategy and production, pretty self-explanatory there. And then third would be social media training and coaching, which has really ramped up the last number of years during the pandemic as more executives have become more active on LinkedIn, for example. I do a lot of coaching in that area. One coaching session for a pretty large company doing that right now, but also do some trainings for various companies and agencies too. I have an agency client right now that I'm doing a lot of kind of lunch and learn trainings for. It's a lot of fun. So if you're interested in more about that and working with me, you can learn more at erichansen.com or reach out to me at eric@erichansen.com. So with that out of the way, we're here to talk about trends, topic du jour. And there's a lot of trends presentations and a lot of trends blog posts and all that kind of stuff this time of year. And a lot of those typical trends presentations might talk about things like, the rise of the next big social network, like Be Real, right? That was a pretty hot topic in 2022 coming into this year. But from the stats that I've seen recently, there's been a big drop in downloads from the peak of last year. Daily active users are down as well. So Be Real, next big social media network, maybe, maybe not. We're not going to really talk about that today, but the stats aren't painting a great picture. What about the alternatives to Twitter? Like that was a hot thing at the end of last year. Coming into this year, you thought everyone would be talking about that. There certainly are people talking about that, but the stats that I've seen show that like Mastodon, which was one of the big decentralized networks that everyone was flocking to, daily active users are plummeted since that big shift in late last year. And as someone that explored doing this and kind of played around with Mastodon, it's not the same as Twitter at all, and pretty complicated and not nearly as intuitive. And there's a lot of pain points there that these decentralized networks may take off eventually, but in the immediate future, I would say probably not. And there's a lot of hullabaloo about social audio too, right? People might talk about social audio being the next big thing, but again, the stats I've seen, like this chart from marketing charts here, show that that's not the case. 9% of US adults have even played around with it last year. So there's not a lot of momentum around social audio at the moment. And then, obviously the elephant in the room is like the metaverse, Web 3.0, but like, again, based on what I've seen, like we're just not quite there yet. We'll probably get there eventually, right? The metaverse 3.0, whatever that looks like, is probably coming eventually. But based on the activations I've seen, I've read about all that stuff in the last year, like it just doesn't seem like we're at that point yet. And it's certainly not relevant to most of the people on this call. There's certainly some brands out there, the Nikes of the world, that are doing things there. And for them, maybe it makes sense. But again, the lion's share of the people on this call, I would guess, probably not really all that concerned with what's going on with the metaverse right now. So instead, just like I kind of said in the promo for this, these presentations that I put together, and I think this is my 7th year of doing this, they're usually designed to be much more pragmatic and really ask this question: what will actually trend and matter in 2023 to the largest group of people? So it's kind of reflective of the way I work and I consult. It's like I'm probably pragmatic to a fault, but I usually don't try to get not too wrapped up in the shiny objects and instead focus on the things that are going to matter to the greatest number of people. So we'll go through 10 of these. If you have questions, I'll try to take some at the end, but if not, put them in the chat. And I'm going to try to address those in an email after, is probably my guess, but I'll see if I have time at the end to take questions. But like I said, put them in the chat at the very least. But number one would be starting with a big one that I'm sure many of you have already heard about, but the social search will become a pretty big priority, I think, in the year ahead. And starting with, TikTok front and center, right? Like that, and the Google people are very aware. When you start to see quotes like this from a VP at Google, you know they're aware of the fact that TikTok's taking some of the market share away, and people are searching on TikTok. But keep in mind, look at this quote right here in our study, something like 40% of young people, when they're looking for a better place or a place for lunch, they don't go to Google Maps or search, they go to TikTok or Instagram. Note the young people in there, because I think that's a key distinction, right? Because you think about the lion's share of the TikTok audience, 73% is users between the ages of 18 and 34. And that's not even including teenagers, which I have 2 teenagers. I know they're glued to TikTok 24/7. So that number would be even bigger if you're including teenagers. So TikTok obviously is a broad spectrum now. There's plenty of people 35 plus who are using it, but the lion's share of the active users are still those younger people. So when Google is worried that the TikTok is taking their search away, we're really talking about mostly a younger audience, right? But search obviously is also a big behavior on Instagram as well. We know that Instagram is a huge platform for people to discover new products, to research new products, and even to buy. I hear this all the time from my students actually at St. Thomas, that they're buying stuff on TikTok all the time. They're using it as a research tool. They're looking up stuff there. And this isn't all about search. Certainly not. This is about the feed. Certainly it's about ads too. But there's a search component to it. No question about that. So Instagram as a play for social search, absolutely, for sure. And of course, YouTube, which has always been a search play for brands, and probably a key search play for many brands in terms of let's put our videos out there, let's optimize them, and let's set them up to be found when people are searching for certain topics. So that's not a new thing at all, but it bears repeating because sometimes we use YouTube as this video stockpile, and we kind of forget that we should optimize that content for search on a regular basis. I thought this chart was worth pointing out too when we're talking about, especially when I go back to like Instagram and YouTube or Instagram and TikTok, how social search is weighing against search engine. And you can see here it breaks it up by age group, and pretty interesting that 16 to 24, yeah, social search is kind of in front now. 25 to 34, pretty close. And then after that, it kind of tails off. Search engine's still pretty dominant. So when we're talking about social search, this definitely trends younger, right? It's not, my age group, that 45 to 54 there, we're still using search engines for the most part. Like we don't default to TikTok or Instagram to search for things on the web. We're still defaulting to Google. But if you're 20 years old, you might be defaulting to TikTok right now, or defaulting to Instagram. And that's a huge behavior change, but it's going to take time for that to really turn into a majority of the people. Right now, again, it's still a lot of younger people. So that bears repeating when we're talking about social search. If you're targeting an older audience, they're probably still using a lot of search engines. So something to keep in mind. But I thought I'd give you an example of kind of what this might look like for a company. And I'll kind of pick on a local company here in town, Anderson Windows and Doors, former client of mine. Just did a simple search for them on TikTok, and their brand name, just their brand name alone. And you can see all the hashtags that popped up with Anderson Window in it, and Windows, which tells you there's a lot of people tagging content and looking for stuff when it comes to their specific Windows, but also just Windows in general. Which if I was working for Anderson Windows and Doors, I'd think, there might be a search. There's enough volume here where it might make sense for us to, have a social search play on TikTok. We should probably have an opinion on that, and maybe even have some kind of tactical execution on that in 2023. So just some things to think about. Broadly speaking, again, this first one, this could be a whole webinar itself, obviously, and a huge deep dive, but some basic simple steps I think that you can think about for the year ahead would be, number one, optimizing your social profiles with keywords, like all the platforms would apply to that basically. Adding alt text to those images on Instagram and Facebook, I think, is always a good idea to optimize search. Using keyword phrases and titles on YouTube. Again, if we're going to optimize our YouTube content, we haven't done that for a while. Just the keyword phrases and titles would go a long way. It's just that simple step. And then always using those subtitles in your videos. Obviously, that applies to YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and LinkedIn and all sorts of platforms there. So again, there's a lot more you could do here with optimizing, but these are just some kind of simple steps you can take with social search this year. Number two, we're going to see, I think we're on the cusp of a big channel priority shift right now. And what I mean by this is, for years, if you go back to like the early days of social media, there was only so many social networks, right? There was Facebook, there was Twitter, there was YouTube, there was a handful of other ones. There really wasn't that many. But then over the years, Instagram, TikTok, now Be Real, Pinterest, Reddit, all these other platforms started to emerge. And now you just have a whole slew of platforms to choose from. And meanwhile, Facebook's sitting there kind of plateauing, right? Excuse me. Stats I've seen, we've all seen around Facebook in the last year. I mean, they've taken a lot of reputation hits. They've seen people, a lot of younger users have left the platform. We've seen engagement levels level off. Just a lot of brands and people questioning the usefulness of Facebook as a marketing platform. Still advertising platform, yes, but brand marketing platform, more questions than answers at this point. And same thing with Twitter, right? When Musk took over Twitter last fall, we saw, a lot of people saying they're leaving. I don't think they actually left. Maybe they did. A lot of people saying they're leaving Twitter, and a lot of action around that. So a lot of uncertainty going on with Twitter right now, for sure, which leads us to this kind of stat where we see engagement rates on Twitter and Facebook, the legacy platforms of way back, are not even holding a candle to Instagram, and definitely not TikTok right now. So you're seeing the minuscule engagement rates on those platforms. And that's kind of leading this discussion. And you're seeing less trust, right? So like these graphics all have Twitter and Facebook at the bottom. And certainly in terms of trust, we know those two would probably be at the bottom based on the actions and behaviors of the leaders and the decisions they're making as platforms the last couple of years. But it's also marketers too. Marketers are also saying, hey, we're not investing in these platforms as much as we're investing in TikTok and YouTube and LinkedIn and Instagram. And you can see this chart again, they're at the bottom in terms of people not increasing their spend and more people decreasing their spend there. So lots of red flags for those two channels specifically right now. Meanwhile, you're seeing big jumps in TikTok. You're seeing big jumps in Instagram. I mean, for a lot of brands, Instagram's their primary channel right now. And that's really been the case actually for a couple of years, probably. You're seeing big jumps in YouTube. You're seeing big jumps in LinkedIn during the pandemic. And for B2B businesses, that's been their primary channel maybe for a while. So all those channels are seeing big jumps, and they're seeing success, and they're seeing engagement rates that are higher, and they're seeing more growth. So why is that happening? Well, brands are seeing lower cost pers on TikTok for sure. We know that YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok are the best places to engage creators and influencers, which we know is a big deal, and definitely a trend that's not going away right now. And we know that LinkedIn is really the best dual platform for brands that are interested in talking about their master brand, but also their employer brand, which is increasingly important right now. I know the economy is a little shaky, but people are still struggling to get the right talent in place, and employer brand is going to be super important no matter what happens with the economy in the next year, because eventually it's going to turn around. So these numbers kind of back up that LinkedIn momentum too, right? Like we know LinkedIn really built up momentum during the pandemic, but it's kind of staying now, right? It has staying power, and therefore you're seeing a lot of brands say, you know what, we need to invest more in LinkedIn, right? And again, master brand and employer brand there, which makes a big difference. You can't really do that on a lot of other channels. Yes, a little bit on Instagram, maybe some brands do it on Facebook, but really LinkedIn's the place to do that. So that's been a big shift as well. So what does this look like in action? I thought I'd show you a few brands that are kind of exhibit this and really bring it to light. One is Upenar. Some friends over at Upenar, they were doing a great job with TikTok last year. I wanted to kind of give them a shout for this, but this one kind of shows their progression, or their kind of how they stack up their Facebook page versus their TikTok page. If you look at their Facebook page, and I just looked at like the last 10 posts just to get a feel for how they're doing engagement wise and averaged them out, they're averaging 30 engagements per post. So okay, that not great, not terrible either, just kind of on the lower side, I would say. What do you think they're doing on TikTok? Oh wow, 1,800, almost 1,800 engagements per post, the last 10 on TikTok. Like that's a crazy jump, right? So that just shows you the organic engagement from one platform, legacy platform, Facebook, to emerging platform in TikTok. Okay, what about a bigger makeup brand, Sephora, right? I visited this place more times than I care to mention with my 15-year-old daughter recently. So I thought we'd pick on them. Facebook versus Instagram, right? Instagram, primary channel for a lot of makeup brands right now, along with TikTok. Let's see how they're doing. So on Facebook, again, averaging 83 engagements per post, last 10 posts. Not bad, but they have pretty big community sizes, so I would say that's outstanding. Meanwhile, on Instagram, they're seeing almost 3,800 engagements per post. So again, Instagram has become a primary channel for a lot of these makeup brands and retail brands, and Sephora, no difference there. So it's a big jump, right? What about a B2B brand, right? SAP, they're a pretty big B2B brand. Let's see how they're doing on Twitter, legacy platform, versus LinkedIn, emerging platform. And I say emerging platform lightly. I know LinkedIn's been around for a long time. But on Twitter, SAP is averaging 42 engagements per post, last 10. Not too bad. Actually, that's pretty good for Twitter, I would say. Even if they are huge. But what do you think it looks like on LinkedIn? Over 1,600. So again, big jump. Like that's not like, that's pretty close. No, that's destroying Twitter. So you can see why these brands are kind of making the shift from legacy to more of these emerging platforms. These emerging platforms are really, really crushing in terms of engagement versus the Twitters and Facebook. So I think this is a trend you're gonna see more of in the year ahead. You're gonna see more brands kind of think about what they do with Facebook and Twitter, and then can we put more eggs in our LinkedIn, Instagram, and TikTok baskets, and maybe some other platforms? Yeah, maybe. Number 3, focus on accessibility and social will increase. So this is one that kind of came to light for me last year at a conference in Orlando, and I heard a woman speak on, it was kind of like the preeminent voice on accessibility and social. And one of the stats she shared right at the beginning of her presentation was a good one. It was 15% of the US population has some kind of disability. So that seems like a big number, right? But like it includes all sorts of disabilities, as far as she was saying, at least. And but it's a big number, right? Like think about your population of your audience. 15% of those people, in theory, have some kind of disability. Wow. So why do I think this is gonna trend in the year ahead? Well, we know that inclusivity is more important than ever before. We know, in compliance and legal, we're gonna factor in with ADA type situations. And quite honestly, with the economy the way it is, this is a chance for more brands to reach more people. I mean, I just told you 15%, right? So if you could reach 15% of your audience more effectively, wouldn't you do it? With a few simple steps, I think the answer is yes for most people. So what does this look like in action? I thought I'd show you a little example of a tweet here, and what this tweet would sound like to a person with sight issues.
Well, tweetbot, main window, at KiwiNerd window, table, Unions Australia, at Unions Australia, today's T, underscore 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 backslash poverty exists not slash backslash because we can't slash vertical line backslash feed the poor slash underscore underscore vertical line backslash but because we slash backslash can't satisfy slash backslash underscore the rich underscore 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 slash Unions Australia selected as keyboard focus. You are currently on a table. To enter this table, voiceover off.
So as you can hear there, that's not ideal. If you have a sight issues, that's not going to make a lot of sense when you're hearing that tweet. And we certainly see a lot of this kind of stuff on Twitter and other social media networks, right? So the accessibility of that kind of tweet is not great. And hashtags matter too, right? I used to work for Sleep Number, and we use this "We Are Sleep Number" tag all the time. I think they still use it actually. And instead of saying "We Are Sleep Number" with all lowercase, using "we are sleep number" with initial caps makes a big deal, because think about how that screen reader is going to read "we are sleep number" with lower caps, right? It's going to mush them all together, versus "we are sleep number" with initial caps is going to read it as "we are sleep number." So hashtags matter too, and how you organize those. Emojis is a prime culprit in the accessibility world. Checking the descriptions of those emojis is very important. I mean, as a 50-year-old guy, I don't know what all the emojis mean. So I frequently have to look them up too, but you have to know exactly what your emoji is connoting before, or what it means before you use it. Using them all at the ends of posts makes sense, because you want to make sure, again, think about the screen reader going through and reading that, and putting that at the end makes sense so it doesn't disrupt the text. And just in general, using them in moderation is what the suggestion is, just because, they disrupt the text more than anything. And then again, that alt text for images, we talked about the alt text for different purposes, but for accessibility, a huge deal. Just going in and adding alternative text to images on like Facebook and Instagram, for example, can make a big deal for accessibility. And just some simple do's and don'ts. This is two good resources I'm going to leave you here with if you want to learn more about accessibility, because I'm certainly not the expert in this area. Meryl Evans at meryl.net has some good do's and don'ts, and she's a good follow on LinkedIn, by the way, too, if you want to learn more about this stuff. But we talked about those do's, but the don'ts, don't use those fancy font generators. Those are problematic for accessibility. Don't use animated GIFs in the comment threads, big no. And then refrain from using all caps as well. So, it just gives you some things you probably didn't think about. I didn't think about these things before in terms of accessibility. And again, it goes back to that 15%. Like, do you want to reach that additional audience, or do you want to continue to ignore them? Now, the woman who presented in Orlando, her site is Accessible Social. You can find this online pretty easily, but treasure trove of information when it comes to accessibility. I encourage you to look this up. Those are the two resources I'll leave you with, but give this some thought. I think this will really emerge as something we'll hear more of in the year ahead. Because again, I think about that 15%, man, like that's a lot of people to just kind of give up on, and really some simple things you can do to make the content more accessible. And if that's not even appealing to you, it's a business case, but there's also kind of a moral case, right? Like, this is kind of the right thing to do. Like, let's make our content more inclusive. Let's make it more accessible for everybody so we can communicate effectively with everybody. Number 4, keeping up with the video first shift will continue to be a struggle, I think, for social media teams. And because we all know that, video content is kind of where it's at with social media right now, right? This short graphic here from Sprout Social shows you short form video, preferred content in the feed right now, followed by images, not surprising. Live video, 3. Okay, there's more video. GIFs and memes, often video, right? 4. So 3 of your top 4 involve video. Like that's a lot of video. And we know this is the priority with channels, right? YouTube, obviously, all video. TikTok, same. Instagram, Reels, kind of prioritized right now, even though they said recently they're not. LinkedIn, you're seeing more video there. You're seeing more live video there, for sure. So a lot of the platforms are prioritizing video. People want more video. However, whenever we see these kinds of graphics that talk about the top challenges facing like social media teams, the number one thing I see on every one of those lists is finding time and resources, or some kind of bandwidth issue, right? Like, we don't have time. So that's problematic, because when I polled my audience on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, and some of you might have taken this poll, how long does it take you to create these TikTok or Instagram Reels? 74% of you said between 2 and 4 hours. Well, that's a lot of time. 4 hours, that's 10% of your work week on one video. And keep in mind, 26% said it takes them more to 4 hours. And that's a lot of time. So you're talking about a lot of time invested in producing these videos. And so you really got to start looking hard at that ROI, right? Meanwhile, the last thing to keep in mind here is that we know social media teams are not very big, right? 82% of social media teams are between 1 and 3 people. A lot of you are on your own, right? A lot of teams are 1 person. So the demands of that video become real problematic when you're a 1 to 3 person team, and you got to manage all these channels, and you got video breathing down your neck and all this time. And this kind of feels like this is where we're at, doesn't it? Social media people, I know you guys can feel my pain. if you work in social media full time, this is where you're at. So this trend is more like therapy, right? I don't have an answer on this one right now. I don't think anyone does. There's certainly more efficient ways to do video. There's certainly people out there can help you, but that requires budget, right? This is where we're at. So I guess my takeaway here is like, as you enter into this new year and you're getting all this pressure to do all these things and you're getting this pressure to do more video with social, just know that you're not alone. Like everyone's struggling with this right now. And if anyone tells you not struggling with it, they're lying. They're absolutely lying, because it takes a lot of time to produce these short form videos. It takes a lot of time to produce video in general. It takes a lot of budget, and no one has infinite resources. And if anything, it's the opposite right now. It's more finite resources than ever before. So therapy session over. Number 5, I think posting frequency hopefully will ratchet back to save the sanity of our social media team. So this kind of relates to last. This is my therapy portion of the presentation. And we'll start with Salesforce, right? Salesforce certainly does not have a social media team of 1 person or even 3 people. They probably have a pretty large social media team and probably a fairly large budget. But even Salesforce is posting, you can see here I went through the last 3 months, 47 tweets in January, 89 in December, 77 in November. I mean, that's a lot of tweeting. And that's one platform. That's one platform. So what about our friends at Wisconsin? I like to pick on Wisconsin. I'm a Gopher fan, and I'll take every chance I can get to kind of poke some fun and pick on my Bucky comrades. Good-naturedly, of course. But University of Wisconsin Business School, you can see here, I went through the last 3 months of last year for them, 23 posts on their Facebook page in December, 24 in November, 26 in December. That's still a lot, especially considering they're active on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and they're posting almost the same amount there. I mean, that's 90 to 100 posts a month. And I can guarantee you the University of Wisconsin Business School does not have a huge social media team. So that's a lot of content being churned out by a very small social media team. And again, what is the biggest challenge facing social media teams right now? Bandwidth, right? We don't have any time. Then why are we posting so much, right? Why are we posting so much? And this is beginning to affect our mental health. There's no question about it. I see stuff like this all the time, on my LinkedIn feed, right? Where people, this one sums it up. The hardest part of social media marketing isn't creating, managing social overall. It's burnout. It's burnout. We're all burned out, right? The last couple of years are contributing to that with the pandemic, but also just being stretched so thin because we're being asked to do all this stuff. Our responsibilities are ever increasing, and we're posting 100 times a month. Like, we're gonna have to ratchet things back for our sanity's sake at the very least. So why does this make sense? Number 1, quality versus quantity, right? The volume play, the era of the volume play was long gone. That was gone a long time ago. So it's time to really take stock and say, we don't need to post 7 times a week. We probably don't need to post 5 times a week. Like 2 to 3 to 4, probably enough. So focusing on quality versus quantity, that's number 1. Number 2, using that social media advertising to amplify those fewer posts I continue to think that's a huge strategy that I know a lot of brands are doing that, but there's certainly a big chunk that still aren't. So that can be a very, very effective. I use that for one of my smaller clients. It works wonderfully. So I wouldn't undersell that at all. And then lastly, I go back to mental health a little bit, where freeing up teams to focus more on innovation and experimentation, because mental health alone, right? We need to worry about the mental health of our teams. We also need to free them up to be creative. And we can't do that if we're posting 100 times a month. We just can't. It's not going to work. And what might end up happening is a lot of brands do what Lush did last year. And they just said, you know what, Facebook and Instagram, we're going to stop. We're not going to do that anymore. And they recently talked about the outcomes of this, and they thought the outcomes have been pretty good. They haven't really seen a big business impact. They think it's been good for their customers. Now, they made the case that this was all about customers and how they were taking the mental health of young women into consideration when they did this, but it might have been a little bit about their team too. I have a sneaky suspicion. So you might see more brands do this year too. I have a feeling. Number 6, the fragmentation of social media will also accelerate this year. And I thought this was a good graphic to start with on this one, because it kind of shows you how much has changed in just the last, 30 years. Like, I came into the business right after this, right after that 1994, you see there, 1996. is when I graduated from college. And I remember at the time, it was like, our jobs in PR and communications were really focused around the traditional channels, right? It was like TV, radio, print, billboards, outdoor, that kind of stuff. But since then, okay, well, let's see what's happened since 96, right? Email, web, all the social stuff that's happened, all the change there, generative AI now, you have all these things that have changed, metaverse, all that stuff exploding now. I mean, that's a lot of change and a lot of fragmentation. And just looking at this chart from Hootsuite at We Are Social, great report, by the way, if you're looking for social media stats year to year, which shows you, just a short list of the popular social media platforms. And you can see, again, the legacy ones right at the top. But then if you keep going down the list, you see, okay, we see all these, like some foreign channels. We see Telegram, we see Pinterest, we see Reddit, we see Quora. It's a decent list. And this is just the big ones, right? Also competing for your attention are podcasts, because this is all about attention. Podcasts, the average listener now listens 8 of those a week. If you have a gamer in your family, you know how much time they're spending on those things. Other niche platforms like Twitch that go along with the gaming, actually. And newer platforms like Be Real. You got a lot of stuff competing for your customers' attention right now. And like, this is kind of the reality of 2023. And I know this is an old chart, but I like to show it because it shows the overwhelming nature of all the platforms available right now and the fragmentation that's happened with social media. It's not the social media of 2012 where there was like a handful of platforms. There's a ton of platforms now. And a lot of them have a decent amount of traction. And your customer only has so much time, right? A very short amount of time in the day, and they can't spend time on all these platforms. So, one of the outcomes of this for you is prioritization. You only have to participate on the channels where your customers show up and the channels where you have the time and resources to participate on. That's really it. So don't be afraid to ditch those bigger platforms for the smaller, more niche platforms if they make sense, right? So if like Facebook's not working for you, like maybe you pause Facebook for a while and you spend more time on Pinterest, for example, if that's a channel that's working for you. And I think it's, meaningful to say this out loud. Like, you don't have to be on every social media channel. You just don't, not in 2023. Those days are kind of over. And I know everyone kind of feels like we have to be on Twitter, we have to be on Facebook, we have to be on all these channels, but you don't have to be on all the social media channels. Not right now. Not considering everything we have on our plates, not considering the pressures we have, not considering the lack of resources. You just don't. All right, number 7. Creators, I think, will become the face of more brands. And really here I'm talking about a trend that's happening largely on TikTok. There's a brand called Away that did an interesting TikTok. I believe this was late last year, where they invited, you can see I kind of painted out here, but they invited social media managers from other brands to this outdoor escape. And they kind of talked about how it went. And the other social media managers were featured in the video. And they kind of talked about how their brand kind of impacted or a little quip about their brand in terms of the adventure. And it was kind of cute, and the engagement numbers were through the roof. I mean, this is a brand that's not exactly a household name, Away. And you can see here, 19,000 likes, 700 comments, ton of reposts, pretty good engagement stats, especially when you consider how they did their previous 10 posts on TikTok. They only averaged 111 likes and 5 comments. So it's astronomical jump, which makes sense because they're featuring these faces of the brands, which is a huge trend, right? All these different brands had the faces that were featured in it. And in the comments of that post, you saw a lot of other social media managers that were commenting saying, hey, I'd like to be a part of the next one. So like, this is indicative of a bigger trend here where organizations and company or, organizations like Planet Money with NPR are featuring a person as the face of their brand on TikTok. And you can see your Planet Money, a huge TikTok following. And this guy is really the face of their TikTok channel. And he's, doing a nice job of explaining, complex financial topics to a younger audience. Smart strategy. A little bit closer to home, quick trip in lacrosse. You can see smaller audience. But again, this young woman, I believe, a recent University of Lacrosse graduate, is their face of the brand online, featured in numerous videos. Not all the videos, but enough of them where she's kind of the face of their brand on TikTok. She's running the channel and she's the face of it, right? So you're seeing this trend with other brands too. Taco Bell has done this, Nerf has done this. There's a number of other brands. And it makes sense. It's a good entry point for brands into TikTok, right? Because think about how brands are playing on TikTok. They're either doing one of two things. They're kind of doing this when they're playing on trends and memes and stuff like that, or they're kind of sharing their advertisements out there, which a brand like, I remember I looked up like Chevrolet, for example, and that's kind of what they're doing, just kind of putting their advertisements out there. And it's really not working well as a rule. So this makes sense as an entry point for brands, but there are some considerations. Starting with, how do you find the right talent to do this, right? You got to have the right kind of person that has a feel for TikTok, understands how to do it, understands the nuances of it, but also you feel has a good feel for the brand and can represent the brand well online. That's not an easy thing to do. So you got to find the right talent. That's hard to do. And then what happens if that person that's being featured in the videos, that now is the face of your company on TikTok, leaves the company or moves to a different position within the company? Because that's going to happen, right? Like, how long do people stay in jobs anymore? One to 2 years, especially at the lower levels, right? Like, they're going to move on to something else quickly. Like, then you're going to have a gap. Then you're going to have people saying, hey, what happened to Lauren on TikTok? You got to account for that, right? And then there's a lot of discussion around, should these people that have been the faces of the brand, should they be compensated differently? Like, the guy from Taco Bell, for example, he's bringing he's bringing all this awareness. He's driving, potentially revenue for the company. Like, should he be compensated more than an entry-level employee or a mid-level entry-level employee? And then finally, do they have to be involved in every video? Like, I showed you the woman from Quick Trip. She is not involved in every video, but that's a discussion to think about. So there's a lot of considerations to think about. Even though I do think you're going to see more of this, I do see this as a good way for brands to get involved in TikTok. But you really got to think through this, because it's not just as easy as like, oh, let's put our person who's running TikTok, he or she could be the face of the brand. Well, yes, decent idea, but making sure you're doing your due diligence and thinking through some of the implications for that, I think makes sense before you just jump in. So I told you we weren't going to talk about the alternatives to Twitter, but what we are going to talk about is the fact that I do think Twitter will recede as a brand marketing tool in 2023. Because, I mean, really, if you think about it, think of everything that's happened since October with Twitter, right? Like, I mean, Musk bought it, well, then he laid off a bunch of people, and that was pretty dramatic and affected a lot of people, and just didn't seem like it was handled that well. They had a massive drop in revenue. A lot of advertisers left the platform. There's been a lot of kerfuffle about that. He's releasing polls about reinstating former President Donald Trump and all sorts of unusual things that he's doing with his polling activity. And then, if you remember the Eli Lilly issue, where when they had some issues with the verification system, some person tweeted this under an assumed what looked like a real Eli Lilly account, and caused a huge crisis with Eli Lilly, to the point where I believe their stock price went down that day, or at least a couple days after that. So serious implications for the brand there. And they've been all over the place on the verification process. Just lots of uncertainty with Twitter, obviously, really lots of uncertainty. And as a result, not surprisingly, some brands have paused. And not just any brands, Target has paused. You can see here their last tweet, at least as far as I can see on their timeline, was October 31st last year. Whole Foods, looks like their last tweet was October 27th last year. Best Buy, same thing. November. REI, same thing. November. So you're seeing some pretty big, substantial brands saying, you know what, we're just going to pause here and see what happens. And maybe they go back and maybe they don't. Who knows at this point? But like, you're seeing a lot of brands do that at this point. And the bigger issue here to me really isn't the fact that, well, Musk bought Twitter and now it's kind of a weird place and it's not safe and all that stuff, even though a lot of that stuff may be true. The bottom line is Twitter wasn't really working that well for most brands anyways. And sure, for Target, yeah, it might have been working. They might see value in it. They're a pretty big brand. Maybe they don't give it up. Although they did pause it. But for the garden variety brands, it wasn't working. It isn't working. And we'll just throw Fairview out as an example here locally. So Fairview, a place where I used to work full-time, my last full-time job, they have a pretty small Twitter following, but they have a pretty active page. They tweet regularly with 5,900 followers. But if I looked at their last number of posts, they're averaging just 4 engagements per post or per tweet. There really isn't too many worlds where anyone could say 4 engagements per tweet is effective. So I would say that's probably not working, right? And what about Eli Lilly, right? They were the victim of that attack before. What about them? They have a huge community on Twitter. They've invested in Twitter big time over the years. But even them, with all those followers, right? They're averaging 36 engagements per tweet. Like, that's not working. That might not be worth their time. And that's probably the bottom line at this point, right? Like, it's not working. Maybe we pause, maybe we delete. I don't know. But what should you do right now? Like, I would encourage you to do your own analysis, right? Look at Twitter. Is it still working for you? Do the research just like I just did. Look back at last year, like how many engagements per post did you average? What was your reach? Was it working? If you did ads, were those working? And if not, it's okay to pause and maybe delete eventually. Maybe. A lot of people are pausing, and the big question is like, will they go back, right? And will they delete? That's a big discussion. But definitely okay to pause if it's not working right now. And instead, put that time and resources that you would use normally on Twitter and put them towards tools that are already working. Double down on the platforms that are working for you. Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, Pinterest. And then put time and resources in developing more effective content. Whatever the case, buy your time there and then use it more effectively. Number 9, this might be the stretchiest of my trends this year, because I haven't seen a ton of evidence of this yet. It's just kind of a hunch, but it's an educated hunch. And it is that LinkedIn will become an influencer channel. So, we already have YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok for sure, right? I'm betting LinkedIn might become a B2B influencer channel in the year ahead. And I'm not talking about like Richard Branson, right? Huge influencer, huge personality in real life and on LinkedIn, obviously. I'm not talking about these kind of guys who are like the millionaire influencer people on LinkedIn right now. They're kind of trendy and you hear talked about in Wall Street Journal articles and whatnot. I'm more talking about Ann Handley, actually. I'm talking about Ann Handley in a way, because Ann Handley is someone who I know a lot of people on this call know. Very popular, very good reputation, very well loved. Look at how many followers she has. 450,000? Like, holy crap. And that's not that surprising, but still, that's a lot of followers, right? And what brand wouldn't kill for this kind of engagement on Twitter or on LinkedIn, right? Look at those numbers from this post she had. Almost 3,500 likes, 400 plus comments, almost 400 reposts, like crazy engagement. And you're affiliating yourself with a brand like Ann Handley, like home run, right? What about Adam Grant, right? A little bit bigger than Ann Handley, but still, same kind of concept. Like, here's an author, someone has a great reputation, someone who's pretty well loved. How many brands would like this kind of engagement numbers on LinkedIn? Like, pretty crazy. But this is what I think we'll see more of. And again, I couldn't find a lot of examples of brands actually executing this right now. But so I try to give an example in our own business, in my own business at least, with PR and social media. And I keep coming back to Perry Hedrick. So this guy, I don't know this guy at all, but he shows up in my feed all the time. And I find him interesting. So he's the founder of this smaller agency called Crackle PR. He used to be a leader at different agencies I think he's on the East Coast somewhere, Greater Boston. But you can see here, robust platform, robust profile. He's got almost 45,000 followers. And more importantly, he's showing up in my feed a lot, but he's not doing the typical agency thing where he's promoting his agency all the time and talking about how great they are and all that stuff. Instead, he's starting discussions. He's bringing up topics. And that, to me, that's really interesting. So I find him to be a good conversation starter. He seems to be a thought leader of sorts. He's definitely a provocateur, and he's becoming an influencer on LinkedIn. So to me, like, if I'm a brand like Cision, like, would he be someone I would work with to be an influencer partner on LinkedIn? Yeah, I would think so. Look at his engagement numbers on his posts. Like, they're always really high. He's really good at stirring the pot and getting people thinking about different kinds of topics that are important on LinkedIn. And that's the kind of person, like, I go back to Ann Hanley, Perry Hedrick, people like that. These are the kind of people I think are going to emerge as maybe, even though this is going to be his primary job. Perry Hedrick's running an agency, Ann Hanley's running an organization. It's not their primary job, but they might be seen as influencers that other companies might start working with down the line. And finally, number 10, I know user-generated content has actually been on people's minds for a number of years during the pandemic, especially, but I think we're going to see even more of this in the year ahead. And oh man, hopefully we'll see fewer holiday posts and a little bit fewer branded graphics, because I don't know about you guys, but I'm just getting so tired of seeing this kind of thing in my feed. And I see this all the time in the audits I do, all the time. And I mean all the time. These are showing up. And still in 2023, these are showing up. And these just continue to baffle me, because I just don't know what this does for these brands, right? Like, if you're this organization, like, what is this doing for you? It's clearly, stock photography. It's clearly a generic. This could come from any brand. It makes zero sense to me why people are spending this much time and resources on this, especially when we talked about during this presentation where people are strapped for time. Like, why are we doing this? And branded graphics are in the same boat, in my opinion. Like, they have a spot for sure in spots, but what I see, again, in the audits I do and looking online every day, I just see too many of them. There's just too many of them. Like, we don't need this many of them. And in this one's case, I mean, look at this one too. Like, this is hard to read, and I'm looking at it on my laptop. Like, how am I going to read this on my phone? Like, you're featuring a branded graphic with text that there's no chance I'm going to be able to read. So, like, well, what good is that? It's just time. It's time to stop the madness, right? I think I talked about this on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago, where I said, let's just all agree, no more holiday posts, and we're going to ratchet back the branded graphics, because the holiday posts are merely an engagement grab at this point, right? People say, well, they're working, we should keep doing them. Well, yeah, but at what cost? And really, what's the point? I mean, it's not just all about engagement, right? We can't just play that game. Your time is better spent working on more high value projects and work. There's no question about it. And the branded graphics are, again, they're okay in spots. I'm not saying we get rid of those completely, but I just see way too much overdoing of that, and we got to bring it back a little bit, right? They're just, and especially those ones with hard to read type, which I see a lot of. That's really surprising, because it's almost like they didn't take the time to think about what that would look like on a mobile device, which is where most people are looking at your content. So it's really time to stop the madness and instead really lean into that user-generated content, because I continue to see stats like this, and I know some of these stats are old, but they're still applicable today, where it's like the user-generated content is usually out there for most brands, and it's usually going to be super effective, whether it's driving awareness or engagement, or whether it's driving traffic and conversions. Like, it's really pretty effective at doing most of that stuff. And it saves you from producing content on your own. So there's brands doing this all over the place right now. So it's not like this is not a trend that no one's catching on to, but I just think we'll see more of it in the year ahead. And I really hope we see less of those holiday posts too. But Allegiant Airlines, I did did an audit for a airline last year. And so I got to look at these guys, and some of their most successful posts on like Instagram and Facebook specifically were these user-generated content pictures of their airlines, or of their airplanes in action. And there's, I didn't know this before I did this audit, but there's this whole micro community of photographers who will go out there and take pictures of these airlines. And all Allegiant's doing is saying, hey, photographer person, like, can we use your content in a post? We'll give you credit. We'll give you some notoriety. And I'm guessing that's what they're doing. And these posts are working wonderfully for them. The Starbucks has created a whole Instagram page based on this. The Starbucks Partners page is devoted to recruiting and retaining their employees, and it's all based on employee generated content at Starbucks, and wildly successful. All their posts just get a ton of engagement. So this is I got to think this is a huge win for Starbucks. And then the tourism organizations have been all over user generated content for years. I picked on Florida here, but man, you can look at almost any tourism organization. They're using, I mean, Airbnb does it all the time too. They're all using user generated content, and for good reason. Like, they could get out and get all these pictures, but it would cost them a lot of time and resources to do it. Meanwhile, you got an army of people that are more than willing to snap pictures and be featured on their page. I mean, I'm a huge North Shore fan, and I've been trying to get on the Visit Duluth page for years. I'm still crossing my fingers that that'll happen, but that's pretty common practice. So I think I do think there's opportunity here for brands, and even brands you might not think have opportunity. You might be surprised if you go out and look at and see how much user generated content is out there, and what you get your hands on. So I think that'll be a last trend we'll see in 2023. So there you have it, your 10 social media trends for 2023. Don't feel like you have to write all this down. I'll be sharing with this deck with you in a follow-up email, most likely tomorrow. Again, if you're interested in working with me, you can reach me at eric@erichansen.com. You can learn more about me at erichansen.com. Or you can sign up for my weekly newsletter where I share all kinds of insights like this each week. Again, you can find that at erichansen.com, or follow me on LinkedIn if you'd like, where I share some of this stuff there as well. Let's see, we have a few seconds left, so maybe I'll jump into the chat and see if there's just a few questions we can answer. I don't see a ton of questions. You know what? I want to go through this and summarize, and I'll address the questions in the follow-up email tomorrow. But thank you all for joining today, and look forward to seeing some of you in person, hopefully at an event around town here for those of you in Minneapolis, St. Paul area sometime soon. And again, for those of you in the Minneapolis area, happy snow day.